I Believe in a Thing Called Love came out of nowhere. And love it or hate it, it's got everything. Ridiculous falsetto vocals, huge glam rock riffs, a great solo. Now I definitely fall into the love it category. It's actually one of my favourite songs ever. Always puts me in a good mood, reminds me of fun times, and is actually my go-to for karaoke. I know, you're amazed. But this song was 15 years past its due date, and it worked. It's the song that made The Darkness overnight stars, and not long after, arguably, tore them to pieces. So, it's the early 2000s. British rock music was in a bit of a weird place, but there was nothing like The Darkness. A lot of the big glam and hair metal bands of the 80s were still going, but they were well past their heyday. But four blokes from Lowestoft, England didn't care. They played what they wanted, how they wanted. They showed up like some sort of time capsule from 1987 and reinvented glam for an audience that wasn't really asking for it, but then convinced them to love it. Where did it all start though? It began in the early 2000s with brothers Justin Hawkins and Dan Hawkins. Justin was the lead singer and guitarist, and Dan played rhythm guitar. They'd both been dabbling in music for a while, but the moment they teamed up properly was the start of something special. They brought in Frankie Poulan on bass and Ed Graham on drums to complete the lineup. The four of them shared a love for classic rock and glam, especially bands like Queen and AC/DC, but with a bit of a modern edge. And what's interesting is that they didn't set out to be this huge glam rock revival act. They just wanted to have fun, write big, catchy songs, and not take themselves too seriously. That blend of cheeky humour and genuine rock passion is what made them unique. They started playing shows around London and built a serious reputation for their energetic and theatrical live performances. Their throwback look and over-the-top stage antics wasn't exactly what was popular at the time, but it did make them stand out. They were with a small label at the time called Must Destroy and released an EP in 2002. After one gig at the Astoria Theatre in London in 2003, they'd hit hyperdrive. This was their first really big sold-out show, and they supposedly played early versions of songs that would eventually appear on their first album. The show helped them get noticed, and they were picked up by Atlantic Records. Suddenly, the boys who set out to have fun were on the verge of breaking big. And so came their first album, Permission to Land, in 2003. And with it, Growing on Me, their first hit single reaching number 11 in the UK. And shortly after that, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, the song that would change their lives. Touching you, touching me, touching you, got you touching me. By the end of 2003, they would have sold over 1 million copies in the UK alone. I Believe in a Thing Called Love wasn't meant to be clever. It was never trying to make some deep point, and it doesn't. In fact, when the band first came up with it, they joked about how ridiculous it was. I can't remember who said it, but we were having a conversation along the lines of, why don't we just write the stupidest song ever? And that's kind of what they did, but they also kind of didn't. The song wasn't meant to be iconic. Not really. It was written from a genuine love of classic rock, Queen, AC/DC, Van Halen. All those bands who knew how to put on a good show. Justin grew up obsessed with the theatre of it all. And when he started writing for The Darkness, he didn't want to be cool or clever, he wanted to be massive. My goal has always been to get every pair of hands in the air. And so they sat down to write the stupidest song ever. Much of this happened at what Justin calls the Table of Truth, a space where they would sit and throw out ideas for songs no matter how ridiculous, and that was all part of the game. It was probably Justin who came up with the first riff. He and Frankie were sparring with that ridiculous chorus line very early on. I came up with the bridge and the back end of the chorus and tried to put it into some sort of semblance of a song. And let's talk about that chorus. I believe in It's pure, unfiltered rock and roll, and by his own admission, the lyrics are daft, and that's the point. Some of the most stupid stuff is the ones that people sing at you, and that always makes me smile. Things like "My heart's in overdrive and you're behind the steering wheel." That's just daft, but in the right way. It's not too stupid, and it's not clever stupid. Just daft. And then there's the delivery of that chorus itself. Those insane high notes. The tempo of it. It's almost impossible to reproduce. Well, of course, unless you're me. The production on it is bonkers, in the best way. It's tight, shiny, and unapologetically loud. The opening riff hits like a glam rock freight train. As soon as they demoed the song to management, they knew they had a great song on their hands, but funnily enough, it still took some time selling to the record label, because glam just wasn't in at the moment. Eventually they released Permission to Land in July 2003, and when it dropped, no one really expected it to do much. But then something weird happened. People loved it. And not just in a niche cult band sort of way, the album took off properly. The band started getting serious airplay. I Believe in a Thing Called Love charted at number 2 in the UK. The album went quadruple platinum. The Darkness was suddenly everywhere. On the radio, Top of the Pops, MTV. And that ridiculous music video only helped push the "this is ridiculous but ridiculously good" energy. And for a short while, they absolutely rode that wave of success. Massive shows, awards, magazine covers, they were playing arenas, and even cracked America. For a band as utterly British and over the top as they were, that's not a small feat. But while all this was going on, something else was happening behind the scenes. Justin Hawkins, the band's frontman and main creative force, started to feel the pressure. The success came too fast, too heavy. And with it came everything you'd expect. The touring, the press, the attention, and the drugs. He discovered that downfall of so many great rockers. Cocaine. Now, he's been open about his struggles since, saying he spiraled into coke addiction pretty quickly once the band got big. It wasn't just a party thing, either. By 2005, he said he was doing about £150,000 worth of coke in 3 years, using up to 5 grams a day. That isn't rock and roll, that's just self-destruction. The pressure of keeping the band going, trying to match the insane heights of I Believe in a Thing Called Love, keeping the image alive, staying at the top, all took its toll. And let's be honest, that song, as brilliant as it is, became a bit of a blessing and a curse. Everyone expected another one just like it, another huge chorus, another ridiculous guitar solo, another moment of lightning in a bottle. But how do you follow something that big? That song that defined their sound, their image, the band's identity? Simple answer is you can't. And that's not always a bad thing. Their second album, One Way Ticket to Hell and Back, came out in 2005. I think it's a really great album, produced by Roy Thomas Baker, who had worked with Queen, David Bowie and T-Rex, so an obvious choice really. But of course it didn't quite live up to the same hype as the first album, and I Believe in a Thing Called Love. And behind it all, Justin was falling apart. He checked into rehab not long after the second album dropped, and soon after he quit the band altogether. That was pretty much it for The Darkness, at least for a while. The whole identity of the band was all tied to Justin, and with him out of the picture, the whole thing just kind of fell apart. It's a bit of a tragic arc. A song that brought them everything also brought them down. But here's the thing, I Believe in a Thing Called Love is still an absolute banger. And I don't think any band or artist should be ashamed of scoring a massive hit early on and not quite being able to outdo it. I see that more as a blessing than a curse. Even if they never surpass it, they've left behind a piece of work that continues to resonate with audiences. I mean, you can't not smile when you hear it. Stick it on at a wedding or a club night or a pub jukebox and you'll get sing-alongs and air guitars, guaranteed. And it's not just nostalgia either. The song has stood the test of time. It still feels fresh and big and fun. When that riff kicks in, you know you're in for a great few minutes. Eventually, The Darkness did make a comeback. In 2011, they got the original lineup back together, they started touring again, releasing new albums, and they've been doing the rounds ever since. And Justin has been clean for years now. He even runs a very popular YouTube channel, Justin Hawkins Rides Again, which if you haven't already, I highly recommend you check out, and tell him Music Mongoose sent you. And by the way, this story really reminds me of Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. That song was so big, it changed that band forever. You can click over here for the story on that one next.